Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Florida. And today our question comes to us from Reverend Ed Carr. And Reverend Ed has this question. Is a handmade magical tool more effective than a mass-produced one? And most people in the magical world, if you ask them this question, they will say, yes, absolutely. Whereas I will say, well, maybe. And my answer to this comes from a certain point of view, which I've often expressed on the vlog, and that is that people are individual. And for a community that claims to be full of free thinkers, there's actually an awful lot of cookie-cutterism in the magical and pagan world. The idea that everyone must do things exactly the same, which really is not very effective considering that people are not the same. So I would say that there are many advantages to making a magical tool by hand, but whether it's more effective or not depends on the person and how they're using it, how they're connected to it, how they feel about it, and many other variables. There is not necessarily a single answer to this, no matter how many other people tell you that there is. And the reason there's not a single answer is that people are simply not all alike, nor are their abilities all alike. And it's all well and good to talk about making your own, but not everyone can effectively do this. And if it were necessary to make your own magical items, for example, athame would never have been part of magical tradition because people did not do it-yourself metallurgy until relatively recently. Metallurgy was very much a specialty that ordinary people did not venture into. So magical knives historically pretty much had to be procured. They might be decorated, they might be altered, but they certainly weren't forged from scratch. And this is true for many other magical items as well. Now, granted, making your tool yourself could be considered to include decorating an already created item, but that's not exactly how the question is asked. But whether we regard it as making the item from scratch or decorating it yourself, the same considerations apply, and the advantages to this are numerous. One of them is you put your own energy into it, and ideally you can be very focused on what you want it to do and build that energy right into it as you create it. You can make it exactly what you want it to be and include the things in it that you want it to have. You can make it very individual. You can make it very special to yourself, and these are all really good things. And you can focus a great deal of energy into that object as you make it and forge a very strong relationship with that object as you make it. And this is certainly an advantage, and it can make it more effective than an item you simply acquire. But it does not necessarily, because you can also be very strongly connected to items that you acquire depending on how you acquire them and how you feel about them, and various other variables that may affect the situation, including who created the item in the first place if it wasn't you, and how you feel about that person. Having an item that belonged to someone that you knew and admired can also be very effective, even though you certainly did not make it. Having an item that has a strong aesthetic appeal to you, or a historical significance for you, or a symbolic significance for you, can also allow you to attach to it very strongly, even though you did not personally make it. And these are considerations that are worth bearing in mind. Yes, making it yourself can be far more effective, but sometimes acquiring it can also be very effective. And it's important to remember that this is not Harry Potter. The items do not do the magic, the person does the magic. The items only help. And if an acquired item, whether mass-produced or one of a kind, does more for you magically in terms of helping you to focus and direct your energy than one you made yourself, then the acquired one is the one you should use. And I think that you will find that your relationship to items will be different depending on what the item is. And I'll give you an example where people use items all the time that they did not create themselves. Anyone who uses crystals for healing, well, you did not make that crystal. You acquired the crystal already as it is. But that didn't stop you from having a strong psychic relationship with it and from using it effectively. And very often when people acquire crystals, they will pass their hand over them to feel them energetically and see which one is meant for them. And that works for mass-produced ritual items just as easily, and sometimes just as effectively. The fact that you did not physically make it does not mean it cannot be highly effective. Now, having said that, making it yourself is a wonderful thing. Sometimes it does make it far more effective depending on the person. It also depends, however, on how you feel about your creative ability. And when you make a magical item, you put a lot of your energy into it, but hopefully that energy will be focused magical intent, not frustration and aesthetic disappointment. But if you don't like your craft projects, and you set out to make a magical item and feel badly about it, that's not a good thing. That's not how it's meant to be done, but I'm sure there are people who have done it. You want to make sure that whatever you're using puts you into a magical frame of mind, appeals to you aesthetically, psychologically, spiritually, helps you to focus your energy, and those are your real considerations, not necessarily how it was created. And so I think in ending I would say, is a handmade magical item more effective than a mass-produced one? Yes. Or no. Maybe. It all depends. And I would say that it's more important to pay attention to your own spiritual reaction to the item, which can be very different from one item to another, and to choose your magical items based on that. Of course, I say this as a person who likes variety, and I tend to like to have more than one of anything. And when I do create things, I will tend to create them more for individual purposes than for all purposes, although it depends on what it is, of course. And I tend to believe in using many different things rather than saying always with the same. And there are people who feel differently. And this again is why it's not a single answer. Some people will want to make their own magic wand and never use another one. Another person will want to have 7 for different purposes, or 10 or 50, depending on who the person is and what their personal considerations are. And these are individual matters. It is not a one-size-fits-all situation. Nothing in magic really is. So those would be my answers. I hope you find them helpful, and until next time, may you blessed be. Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from witchschool.com. Are you looking for the best in pagan and magical education? With more than 12,000 pages, witchschool.com is like having your own personal library with individual learning assistants to help you study. And Witchschool's Anyone, Anytime, Anywhere education system is available any place on Earth, anywhere you are and anytime you want it, as long as you have an internet connection. Witchschool's lifetime memberships are a great value. They really do last a lifetime. They've been there for years and they'll be there for years to come. So get your membership today at witchschool.com.